Good afternoon, everyone. I am supposed to keep you guys awake. So I thought a fun game. Does anyone have bad shoulders? Okay, I will not throw one of these to you. Okay, so today I want to be more interactive. I am not a typical ag economist. My name's Ashlee Westerhold. I actually like people. So that is me versus my whole department of ag economists. I actually am a people person. I like interacting with people, and that is why I'm in the role that I am in as the director of the farm and of Farm and Ranch Transition, or the Office of Farm and Ranch Transition. So today, again, I want this to be more interactive. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I guess my big terabyte drive was going to crash out this computer. Luckily, it did not. So we can roll into what I'm trying to accomplish today. I want to share with you what I have found in my time at Kansas State University, what I have found in the last 3 years of holding this role as the director of the Office of Farm and Ranch Transition. I've worked with a lot of families, and so do you guys. And I want to talk about some of the issues that I see, how I've been helping families work through those issues. And then I am here to help motivate you, to motivate your families or customers to talk about succession planning. So first question, how many of you require an estate plan when lending? Not one of you. Okay. How have you ever brought up the conversation of estate planning? Have any of you ever brought it up to your customers? Okay. Robin, 4 people in the back deserve Robin said I have to be stingy with these. She said we need them for other conferences. So I usually just give them out to all of you, but now I have a token of those 3 gentlemen and the lady in red. What are we talking to our families about? How are we bringing up succession or estate planning with our families? Yes. So what is old to you that you decide to ask them about transition planning? Okay, older than you. So this gentleman in here says if he identifies that his customer is older than him, that maybe they should think about their estate plan. I'm just curious at how bankers are bringing this up. I'm talking to a lot of people who are 65 who have 25 more years that they are going to service a loan. I hope they live those 25 years so that they can service that loan. But I am very aware of whose debt is this after they're gone, who's going to pay for it, how's it going to be paid. But again, this conversation today is more open if you guys are wanting that. If not, you can say I'm ready to take a nap and I won't be answering any of your interactive questions. So over the last 3 years, I've worked with over 200 families. I have recently calculated that I've been in 89 of the 105 counties in Kansas, meeting with a farm family. So I have touched almost all 4 corners. I have been in Mountain Time several times, which is only a very small part of the state. If any of you have ever braved Mountain Time, Kansas, you know what I'm talking about. But I have followed up with 70 families where I've had multiple meetings with their family to discuss transition problems or issues or opportunities. But as it will not surprise you, I have found issues with farm families and transition planning. Why are we not planning in transition? And I found these 6 issues to be majority of why we are not planning the transition from one generation to the next. So, as you guys are probably aware, people don't have basic estate plans. I met a farmer who has $32 million on his balance sheet as his net worth. He does not have a basic will. He is on his third wife and has no children of his own. Do I know where that 32 million will end up? No, I told him he could adopt me, but he did not want to do that, unfortunately. But the idea is that he wants this farm to stay in the family. And I said, okay, who do you consider family? Because you don't have direct heirs. And so these are things that I am finding across the state of Kansas, is that people, even with high net worth statements, do not have basic estate documentation.
Closing date, they asked folks to confirm if anything changed with their estate plan, as we are required to include on policy application any new trusts or changes.
Okay, so this crop insurance agent does require estate planning documents, and they need to make updates to that. That's great. A lot of people are also in business together, business with family members, business with children. And I asked them, when's the last time you've seen your operating agreement? Does anyone have a family who's in an LLC as a customer? When's the last time you as a banker saw an operating agreement? Recently? Okay, you have good customers. Okay, so every LLC gets filed with the Secretary of State with an operating agreement. It can be an operating agreement that they choose, or it is the boilerplate agreement for whatever attorney they have gone to create that LLC, or they filed it themselves, which can be even scarier, I guess. But we talk about operating agreements because inside operating agreements, there's usually buy-sell provisions, which become insanely important when we talk about estate planning and succession planning. Buy-sell agreements can make or break estate planning and inheritance issues. Also, has anyone worked with a farming customer that has job descriptions? Can anyone tell me all the roles and jobs that are within a farmer's job description? There you go. I had a man call me and tell me, well, I can't transition because it would take 3 of them to fill one of me. And I've had that's not unique for what people tell me. But I said, can you split out your job? If your job is really that you are working 20 plus hours a day, he does not sleep, he is an entrepreneur, can you break that into the 3 hats in 3 buckets? What would each of these buckets include? Is it a cattle manager? Is it the seed or the input cost manager, supply manager? Is it someone who needs to be in HR? Look at the financials. What is it? But farmers lack, as you probably know, documentation. You might end up with a shoebox of receipts one day. Maybe that has gone away now that we have more digital age. But documentation is a very lackluster part of a farm operation that I have found. Well, what goes wrong? So what if we die without an estate plan? What is our plan? Well, if you die without even a basic will, you go into intestate. Intestate just means that the state decides how they're going to distribute your assets. Right now, Kansas says half goes to your spouse, half goes to your children. And that is the state law for Kansas. That's the intestate for Kansas. Probate cost. If you die even with a will, you will go through probate. Probated assets just means it goes through the court process. It still usually ends up where it's supposed to go, but there are certain deadlines and times that people have to be aware that you have passed, that you have assets in case any claims come in. So there's also, if you die without any type of documentation, or if you want to, say, buy or sell parts of your business, there's usually a lot of confusion on how to do that if there are not buy-sell agreements in place. Also, lack of knowledge on how things were handled. So if we don't have an idea of what dad or mom do every day, and it's not written down anywhere, I actually am making one of my farmers in this area do voice notes. So I said, did you know you have this phone that you carry around with you? And you can actually just word vomit to it all day of the thoughts that are running through your mind about, oh, I need to cut Milo. Milo is going to go through the cattle. These are the things that I'm thinking about constantly that my next generation is not capable or does not know that I'm going through. So we're doing voice notes. To one, I can timestamp, Dad is thinking about Milo, October 1st, 2025. Maybe if I'm that next generation, that's the time of year that I should be thinking about Milo. It's just kind of getting into the habit of trying to transfer that knowledge. And ultimately, if things are not in writing, there are more loss of farm businesses. If we don't have things in writing, that means everything is open for interpretation, and that means that there are a lot more farm businesses that are being sold. So no one will remember what you said. If they do, they will hear it through their lens or their biases. They will only remember what is written. So I tell farm families that all the time. Yes, you can have this grand idea that the farm stays in the family for the rest of eternity. But if it's not written down, the likelihood of that happening is close to zero. So, writing things down. How do I work with farm families to discuss these lack of documentation issues? Well, I actually make them come up with documents. Isn't that crazy? We work on standard operating procedures, especially on the bookkeeping side. Where are all your passwords? Who is helping you with bookkeeping? Do you have job descriptions or at least loose ideas of what that next generation can do and what they should do? Do you have employment contracts? So a part of my work is working with non-related parties. So I have a good bunch of people that I serve and work with that are transferring from one generation to the next that are not related. So that means a neighbor to neighbor transfer. It could be just someone in your community that you like that is going to take over this farm. But because they're not related, usually comfort level means that we have to be more considerate in employment contracts of the idea is I'm wanting you to work for me and then I'm going to transfer over time. I've seen too many times where that younger generation starts working for that person, is there 5 years and nothing has been transferred. And they just lost 5 years in a process that they thought was transitioning and it wasn't. And so I've been working more with employment contracts with attorneys. We update operating agreements when people are not fighting. So a lot of those buy-sell agreements, lease agreements, we try to get those in place before it's already too late. I tell people if we're too late, we're going into mediation. You're going to meet with a mediator. You're not meeting with me. And then almost every single one of the farm families that I have met with multiple times, we have finalized or updated basic estate planning documents. And so through working with me pushing them, being their coach, we get to the end where they're signing estate documents. So another issue that I see plaguing farm families from making any decisions is this idea of fairness. Almost all the farm families that I have seen an initial trust from say it goes to my kids in undivided interest. I was like, well, if you both passed away, it would do that exact same thing without you having a trust. It just wouldn't have to go through probate. But undivided interest is majority of what I see. However, would I call that fair? It depends on the situation. But I'm seeing that there's a lack of understanding of what the farm child needs to continue to operate, but the family is having a really hard time being fair. And I don't know if you as bankers have been lending because a 65-year-old just got what from their parents who died at 90, just found out they're getting undivided interest of the farm they've been operating since they were 25. I don't know how many of you have seen that recently, Some of the land loans that have come in have been from older people buying out siblings, but I am seeing that more and more, which makes there a huge pressure on transitioning the farm to that next generation, because I need enough money to service this loan of buying out my siblings at 65. So setting market value for farm assets as the amount the farm kid is getting in the estate. I tell people an easy process or an easy thing to write in an estate plan is that all farm equipment and machinery go to farm kid. I say that's an easy statement that can be put into a trust, and it could be amended in a trust. However, when we get a trust document and we see that farm kid gets $1.5 million more because they receive farm equipment and machinery, well, that tells a whole different story to the off-farm heirs. So the value of the estate looks very different, even though it's a simple sentence that could make a lot of difference. So what could go wrong when we talk about fairness and not identifying fairness? Family fights. How many of you have seen an auction because of undivided interest? How did that go for them? Sheriff was called to the auction. That is the worst case scenario. But farming legacies end. In almost every situation that I've heard, well, that's not what my parents wanted. That is not the intention of the parents. Well, the parents were from a tradition of silent generation of we don't talk about our business, even to our own children. And so therefore, this is what happened. A lot of times what could go wrong, we have to sell the farm. We can't afford to pay it back. So as many of you have seen, Shannon Farrell was a part of our programming and farm transition conferences for 2 years in a row. And I do not go through a presentation without bringing up just his simulation results, because it is so empowering. And hopefully you can talk about this with your farm clients. But really, the thing is he ran a strategy with our North or South Central KFMA data. So Kansas Farm Management Association, he used the South Central Association numbers. And he said if these farmers in our South Central KFMA were to pass away and they only had 2 children, and half went to a farm kid and half went to a city kid, what is the likelihood farm kid could still be operating after 3 years if they had to buy out city kid? As you can see, with no operating debt, 0% of them could do that. 0% could take over the farm if they had to buy out that next generation. If they're okay with operating debt, their chances are slightly higher, where it's 1% could survive or 2% if their family held the note. So if you pay out your siblings over time, they hold the note. They still are charging the IRS minimum interest rate, but the likelihood of people surviving, very unlikely. Additionally, this is from my colleague Dick Whitman. He is with Whitman Consulting. He's been doing farm consulting for farm businesses for a very long time, but he looked at the value of transition planning. So this farm, because they kept having to repurchase assets out of the estate, they have lost out on $4.75 million worth of business growth, because every time someone passed away, there had to be a sale or a purchase back of that business. So how do I address fairness? We have family meetings. I implement buy-sell agreements, work with families on buy-sell agreements. We talk about transfer on death deeds, clear division of assets and estate plans, long-term lease agreements. Has anyone seen the right to farm provision? Anyone seen the right to farm, where a farmer has the right to farm this land that is owned by someone else? So attorneys are now using the right to farm provision a little more, just because the idea of they've worked on this farm, they should have the right to farm it as long as they're farming. It also addresses this idea that my son, who is the farmer, if I give him all the land, then when he sells it all, what do my other children get? I tell them the likelihood of your farm child actually selling this land is probably very low. However, this right to farm provision allows that windfall to be to all children if it were to sell instead of the one child. So we are seeing this more in estate plans. There are its issues with a lot of these things, but there are a lot of benefits. Another tool that is used are more entities. Do you see in your banking more use of entities now in the farm business? A lot of people have now a land LLC and then an operating LLC. They might even have a cattle LLC. A lot more business entities are coming online. They're in play. And that is a tool that I like to use with farm families on trying to get assets from one generation to the next while they're alive. So affordability. KFMA publishes their cost of living estimates each year. KFMA estimated close to $90,000 for a family of 2 adults and 2 children in living expenses. So $90,000. I think that has sure gone up as inflation has gone up, but that is not including taxes. The farm would need to have a net farm income close to $200,000 to afford 2 families. Additionally, farm kids, if we have the expectation that they're going to start buying out the business, they need more than that as take-home pay. So we're saying you can buy us out of cattle, you can buy us out of farm equipment, and that will be my retirement plan. But if they are having to live off of $90,000, what farm is paying that to their children? I don't know many of them that are paying that. And so cost of living, very expensive to have 2 generations on the farm. What could go wrong? Next generation could go bankrupt. Older generation cannot retire if their younger generation goes bankrupt. So we're having this sticky point of people holding on at 85, 86, still not retiring, because they don't know how their younger generation is going to afford to buy them out. So we work with people like Lavelle was in here earlier, farm financial analysis. We talk about retirement planning, life insurance policies in case anything gets out of place. I don't know how many people in here have had a conversation with a farmer in their 70s who thinks they could still qualify for life insurance. I tell people you can't really get life insurance past 55, but you call. You call them, see what kind of program they give you as a life insurance policy. But a lot of them at 70 are realizing, oh, I have a lot of farm assets and not a lot of cash assets. I want to make sure the farm assets go to my farm kids. My cash assets go to my non-farm. I'll just get a life insurance policy at 70 years old. I don't know any policy that has been given to a 70-year-old. So if you do, let me know, the snake oil salesman that you know. But I think that there's a huge opportunity if we can use life insurance well, but it's better to start early on that. A lot of farm families don't necessarily calculate or consider the non-cash compensation that they give to farm family members, which could be more than we're accounting for. So another big issue that I'm seeing across the state of Kansas is that we're having some generational difference conversations that I did not see in my magic ball being a huge issue, but I'm finding more and more that it is. Grandpa thinks that the cows will die if they're not fed before 7 a.m. He truly believes that. He thinks that if you are not there and show up that early, then you don't care about the farm, you don't care about the cows, you don't care that this is your life, this is your job. So we are having huge generational differences where they're not willing to let go because they don't trust you will do the exact same thing that they're doing. Also, I've had more families say, my son just got out of the combine during harvest to go watch his kids play ball. That was a huge red flag to Grandpa that this farm is going to hell in a handbasket if the child quits farming to go see their child play a game. So more expectations on family living for millennial generations, and that's becoming very difficult with the older generation letting go because they view that as you not caring as much or you don't have as much value or work ethic. Additionally, the younger generation says, I can't work for nothing anymore. So that is a huge thing where I have a lot of 60-year-olds who did come to the farm and I don't know how they made it work. I really have no idea how they were paid $12,000 a year and were able to support their families. I do think that there were a lot of women that were teachers or nurses. However, the amount of money that it takes now to live versus then, but they can't work for nothing anymore. And I think that's a very big difference. Additionally, communication looks a lot different. Does anyone have kids who are in their 20s in here? Okay, how do you talk to your child? Texting. Okay, so I actually had a farmer the other day. He called me. He has 4 employees. They're his 4 main guys. They are all under 25 years old. He is 67. His 4 main guys are under 25. He is now in a Snapchat thread with them, talking about business every day. He did have to have a conversation about what's appropriate on their Snapchat thread, but that is how he talks to his 4 employees. If I had a magic 8-ball and you told me that this is what's happening in 2025, I would say there's absolutely no way my farmers are out there on Snapchat. But it is happening. Communication looks a lot different. Also, because of this, we're not talking to each other to give them knowledge. We are talking to them to only tell them what to do. It is not brainstorming at 8 a.m. with Dad drinking coffee. It is, Dad told me I need to go out here and do this and do this. There is no conversation on ideas or brainstorming or what's coming up next. It is all daily task. And so they're losing this knowledge transfer by us only texting. So older generation will not let go. Next generation, not interested in coming back. If you tell me I have to meet with my parents every morning at 8 a.m. so that we can have this knowledge transfer, I'd say, oh, I have to get my kids to school. I have other things that I need to be doing. Some people feel like it's not efficient to have those type of meetings anymore. And they might say, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not going to come back. So again, employment contracts, communication of expectations, how will it look moving forward? Continued family meetings to discuss communication. Usually when I meet with farm families, I try to identify the easiest way for us to communicate, but I try to have an in-person meeting at least once a week with my farm families. How many of you are concerned with long-term care? How much is it in Beloit a month if someone were to go into a nursing facility? Do you have one in Beloit? Okay, do you know how much it costs per month? $10,000. So I know Leonardville is about $9,000. I know the nice one here at Meadowlark is like $15,000. It is very expensive. The long-term care policies that a lot of people were able to get were about $100 a day for 3 years. Well, people are living a lot longer than they thought. This number of 2 years and 4 months keeps going up. people are living in care facilities a lot longer. A lot of people are like, well, ag land is an exempt asset to qualify for Medicaid. That is true. However, when it goes to your children, it is a Medicaid recovery asset. That means that Kansas State Medicaid can reach out to your family and say, your parent was on Medicaid for X amount of days and it costs this much. This can be for probate and non-probated assets. Kansas is one of 23 states that allow them to look at your probated and your non-probated assets. So just if your land's in a trust, that doesn't protect you from Medicaid recapture or recovery. So this is a topic that I have to talk about with a lot of farm families, because maybe your parents don't have to pay the bill when they own the farm ground, but at some point the next generation might. And I saw a lot of people in Riley County. I actually met 3 people who were at the same little conference that I was having in Riley County, that 3 of them got Medicaid recovery notices. And those were anywhere from $300,000 to $100,000, a little less, but that was still an IRS sent letter that you need to pay for the care that your parents received. So it is a very big conversation. Need to sell land to pay for care, gift assets while alive. I tell people the biggest silver bullet that you can do to avoid any Medicaid recovery and qualify for Medicaid is gifting your assets while alive 5 years before you go into a home. But what if my children get divorced? Or what if they become a gambling addict at 45 years old after you've seen them for 45 years because they're your children? It's a big conversation that I'm having more and more with farm families. Long-term care planning, there's elder law attorneys that I've been working a lot with that have navigated this IRS Medicaid problem or issue. And so if you are working with clients who have potential estates that want to qualify for Medicaid, but they have large estates or they own land, whatever, there are elder law attorneys that I work with. There's also Medicaid Protection Trust that people are starting to use, or MAPS. And so just be aware that this is happening. Another huge issue that I've been seeing, that you all are in banking, the worst thing you can do with a farmer. What is the worst thing that a farmer can do in their lifetime? Pay taxes. That is the absolute worst thing you could ever do. I have a 76-year-old lady who calls me every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. We have a standing phone call tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. She is having the hardest time transitioning to her 55-year-old son, who has been there for 30 plus years, because she doesn't want to pay taxes. But she also doesn't want to gift and do a gift tax return, because then it will be, she's being unfair to her 2 girls. So I have a lady who wants to avoid taxes and refusing to gift. How am I going to get assets to that next generation? She has to die. I mean, and those assets are not going to go down easily because he has 2 sisters and everything is in undivided interest. But I work with accountants a lot on differentiating between, is this going to be a capital gains, long-term capital gains asset? Is this going to be an income tax asset? And we'll talk about stepped up basis. But people are paying more taxes than necessary when they avoid taxes a lot of time. So she has a lot of carryover grain, a lot. She might be hit with taxes on that. A lot of times people are not transitioning while alive and waiting to die. Shannon Farrell had one of the best things. Don't be the person that people are waiting to have die. Like, just don't be that as a parent. Don't be that as a grandparent. Try to get assets that belong to that person over while you're alive. Continued conversations with accountants, contract sales for land, so we're taking that over time. A mixing of gifting and selling. Talk about installment type sales, but not on equipment and machinery. And if Mark Dykman were here, he would tell you all the reasons why not to do that. So, question, do any of your families have these issues? Any of them, you don't want to admit it, or just don't want to raise your hand, or you're asleep? But probably a lot of your families are facing these issues. Why I'm here today is because I wanted to show you guys that I am still here as a person that can help your customers. I am still transition coaching across the state of Kansas. I am here as a resource for you and your clients. I have people who call me and they ask me to meet with their customer, and I go to usually that bank and I sit in a bank boardroom and I talk to their customer as the banker is there. So I wanted to make you guys aware that I am still here. I am still working on succession issues, and I am a resource for you and your clients. So Elaine Frey's, I love this quote, deal with the emotional factors affecting planning first, then you will have a great foundation for being clear on expectations, creating timelines, and a commitment to action. But yeah, my office, we still run a land link program, so I am matching people who are non-related. I do the one-on-one consultations, and then we have beginning farmer rancher programs. Robin, do you want to talk about our opportunity? Yeah. So I have chip clips that have magnets on them. They're little paw prints. And then I have ice packs. I tell my farm people, if you're using an ice pack, that's great, but think if an ice pack wouldn't fix it. What's going to happen to the farm? So if you're using an ice pack, great, but no, if an ice pack wouldn't help what is hurting, what's the transition plan? I tell people, if you're using the ice pack a little bit more, maybe your time is a little shorter. So just thinking about that.
Do they get one?
Yep, they can get one of each. Questions?
I have coffee with 3 other farmers, no transition, no family members coming back to the farm. And actually we're getting to 4 that they have family, but no one wants to come back to the farm. They have good land, renters. Do you do the transition on a farmer? Because one of the things we've talked about, it seems to be easier to get into farming than getting out of farming. Primarily, like you just got done talking about, capital gains, trying to transition, try to split up different years. Do you do that also?
Yeah, so a recent example is that right now there was a guy, he's by Harrington, he has a haying business, and he had an employee that's a neighbor kid. His kids are not coming back, but he has all this hay equipment. He has balers. He has also a lot of renters. So what we looked at is how do we minimize tax exposure? And so what we're actually doing is putting all of his equipment into an S Corp, having him hold the stock in that S Corp for 1 year. And so he's going to sell that S Corp in an installment sale to this neighbor kid. And he only has to pay on long-term capital gains tax every year that he sells pieces of that S Corp. So we are doing those type of things. You're not going to avoid taxes if you sell anything. Gifting, you can avoid taxes, especially with OB3, putting the estate tax back up. But selling assets, very hard to avoid all taxes. But there are ways of looking and being creative in how we can transfer to a non-party or a non-related party. And we're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, what tools or I guess methods do you use for holding the older generation accountable and keeping their feet to the fire on getting something figured out?
So usually the best tactics that all of my predecessors is scare tactics. So how would you feel if that was your farm for sale on the auction page? How do we make sure that it's not? How do we make sure that you are following through with what you're saying? Is that I put a lot of deadlines on farm families. So the older generation, if you don't have something changed in the next 6 months or show that you're making an effort, then we're going to reduce our workload on the farm, or something that actually wakes them up. I had an actual farmer at 50, has his dad who was 80. He walked off the farm one day. His dad called me the next day. We got an estate plan. We got buy-sell agreements. Within 3 months, a farm child walking off because dad was so distraught. Like, how could he leave me? Well, you were going to leave it in undivided interest to 5 children, and he is 50 years old and has a son who's asking to come back who's 20, and you had nothing in place. And so a lot of scare tactics, unfortunately. What also I help a lot is that I keep them accountable. So if I work with a family, then I set deadlines and I call them. A lot of work gets done the night before, but it gets done. And so, like I said, I have a meeting. I have meetings all the time, but I have meetings that are set in November that we set last March. So they had to get so much done before meeting with me in November. And again, a lot of that will be done a couple of days before, but it will be done. And so holding their feet to the fire by setting deadlines, and being very intentional about them meeting those deadlines.
We actually had a comment online that was equal parts fascinating and frightening. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Or online if you got something?
I just wanted to say we are doing these beginning farmer rancher conferences. There is one here in Manhattan. If you have young beginning farmer ranchers, and we say young, we are taking anyone from 17 to 40, usually is our range. They can come to this conference. It is free. It is a free workshop where we're trying to have them join together, learn from each other, but also learn from Robin and I about how to return to the farm, what are pieces that you guys need. And yeah, so if you are interested, or if you're interested in being a part of the conference in any way, in any of these locations, reach out. So.